what were some of the other things that she was harping on? Because I can't remember so well right now.
What I had said about how the date got filled in and whose handwriting it was.
Yeah, because the notary actually said after you had testified that she put the date on there, and they typically do that.
Well, she testified after I did in December, and I couldn't remember it when we were back on the 7th. And that's when she said I wasn't a candid witness and wanted to get the recording, and we ran out of time that day.
Yeah, and so that was basically, I mean, it was kind of tedious because everything that she was asking and questioning about, it really didn't have anything to do with anything. I mean, it was really just off the wall. Like, what does that have to do with the price of tea in China? And we already knew that they were going to come up with something. As soon as I met Alan, he was telling me about this. He was all like, oh, she's going to claim that she was under duress. So we knew that when the other party got up onto the witness stand, we were going to hear something about, oh, he threatened me, he coerced me, I was under duress. And so that kind of makes me remember, she did ask you about how y'all went to go sign them, like if Katie went with you, if y'all drove separate cars, because my guess is that she was throwing that in, she went with you because you made her go with you and you were overbearing, whatever. So, but
right.
when she got her client Katie on the stand, that's when things kind of got crazy because stuff.
Character assassination, trying to put Alan's mom, the notary, in the worst possible light that she came up with. And I think it's like at that point where you realize that right in front of your face you're hearing that they can lie. And they lie, pretty good to try to get their client off or try to prove a point. So the character assassinations came pretty hard and strong and persistent.
I would like to say something about Johnson. He gave me the opportunity to study and look at her documents that Kim Justice didn't before. And when I was trying to point out the differences, she come to the stand and he stood up beside me and he got to see firsthand himself exactly what I was talking about. We all three went through the differences between the two documents.
Oh yeah, Johnson was on point, man. He was doing a good job with those documents. He wasn't missing anything.
And he was taking incredible notes. So even when something was said that was not totally correct, he went in and corrected or clarified it, especially when it came to the exhibit names and numbers. So,
yes.
Yeah, he's right on the ball. It was pretty amazing.
I have never seen a judicial officer so attentive, and this went on for a while.
Around 2 hours the first go around before lunch.
Yeah, it was about 2.5, almost 3 hours. And so then Katie gets up there, and it really was kind of a pity party. Y'all remember, like, oh, wait. Before we really get there, I got to say one of somebody's favorite thing that Alan did up on the stand, because Alan was kind of being vague and ambiguous. What did Tamara say to you about that?
Tamara was trying to call in my mental health. She asked if I had any mental issues or had any mental issues in the past. Asked if I had any problem, or asked if anybody else knew if I had any mental issues. And then she asked if I had any problems remembering anything. And I said, not that I can recollect.
I can't recall if I can't recall stuff.
Yeah.
I had to stop myself.
So she was basically like, so are you crazy? Does anyone else think you're crazy? Would you forget if someone else thought you're crazy?
In her own words, I mean, she's tried to call me dumb twice on the stand.
So it was just hilarious. Do you have any problems remembering things? I don't remember. Any medical condition? I don't know. Go ask my doctor. So, but that was one of my favorite things. Anyways, they started bringing up things about her mental health, right?
Which was way out in left field from what we were expecting.
So, what were some of the things that they were trying to say, and why did they think it applied?
Well, not being a medical professional, I wouldn't have any concern about why her mental status would have applied, but she asked if she was diagnosed with PTSD, postpartum depression. She said yes. And then she asked if she had been diagnosed with PTSD after her stepdad died, and she said yes. Asked her about her mental status, and while that was kind of when they started attacking my character also. Well, I never would have thought they would have called into question her mental status because she's a registered psychiatric nurse practitioner. So I wasn't expecting anything like that.
Well, everybody should know those people are unstable.
Yeah.
Now, they were trying to establish a precedent that you took advantage of her or somehow coerced her with that, you think?
Yes.
Well, it kind of, they were actually basically trying to say that she wasn't coherent enough because of these issues to sign a legally binding contract. And this is just what I thought was the most hilarious thing of the whole situation, because it's like, okay, you're sitting here saying that she is not competent enough to sign contracts and execute contracts on her own behalf, but then you're going to turn around and say, give her the children and make it to where she's the only one who can sign contracts for them.
Well, you know how they would have played that out. They would have said, give her the children under the court's supervision so we can stick around for ages to come, you know?
And make all the contracts for all of y'all.
Well, and I
Yep.
think one of the most also important issues that didn't come up at all was she was going to school, and she was going to work at the time, and she was making medical decisions for people during that time. And so does that mean that she's not competent in all those that year or 2 years that she was working and dealing with patients, that she hurt or damaged or was incompetent to, whatever it is, administer medicine or take care of them? So.
Well, yeah, during that time period, she was still just a regular nurse, so she was given medication and recommendations to doctors. That's why it kind of, it threw me, because she's supposed to be the smart one, so how are we questioning her mental stability?
Well, and I think
it had been
just questioning her mental stability. It was really questioning yours, how you coerced her and how you used mind control, how you intimidated her. And that was really the main point, was that she was victimized by you. And that, I'm sure, came out of left field. That's what was really probably startled you the most, is that.
When the time lapse, I mean, the things they were claiming, for the postpartum depression and the PTSD, when the separation agreement was actually done, it was the closest thing that happened was her stepdad dying, which was around a year before everything was done.
I still laugh about the fact that they were basically saying she wasn't competent enough to sign contracts.
It's been over 2 years since Sarah was born.
I think that was hilarious. And then after that, they were talking about basically, what did they say about the assets?
Well, she started asking about the business and the assets that it owns, and then the assets that I own, and I told her that I didn't own assets because I wasn't dead and I had property. And that kind of stumped her. And I believe it stumped the judicial officer also.
Gave a funny look at that. He was like, what? I'm going to have to go look that up.
Okay, so after that, everything that we had put in the separation agreement, like I said earlier, was all new. Everything was new. So it had pretty much the original amounts. And so everything that was in there, minus something that I'd forgot, because it was still part of what was in the original documents, was she was trying to claim it was all equity, like it was all positive equity, even though it all still has a lien against everything. She was trying to claim like it was all paid off and I had all this money just sitting in the bank. for me to do with whatever I wish.
So this is the part where everybody should get really, really, really worried about the educational system we have here in America. Because you have an attorney who has a doctorate in law, and they're reading this contract that's really not that difficult to read because non-attorneys wrote it. And you know, the mortgage on the house, because the house was bought, the property was given to them, that's in there. There was a loan that was taken out on a dump truck, I believe, but there was about $35,000 on top of that. Anyways, she's taking all of the debts, what accountants would call liabilities, and putting them in the assets portion of the accounting.
Right.
And now she's saying, look, you have all of these assets, even though none of them are paid off, you still owe on them, but we're going to ask to take them away from you and pay half of what you still pay on or owe to somebody else. It was absolutely insane.
Yeah, she was trying to say that I had $240,000 worth of equity, and then when we separated, my ex come away with $36,000 worth of equity.
And how unfair that was and unjust, and it just proved how controlling he was to deny her and withhold things. It was pretty insane.
Yeah, I had 85% of the equity.
So the way she turned and twisted all of that, besides character assassination and demonizing him, she took all the numbers and totally and completely fudged them to make it look like he was withholding, 80% of the money. It was pretty crazy.
And then right before lunch, she wished to introduce a document into evidence on the record. And it was pretty hilarious. This is one of my favorite parts because, Johnson's like, well, has he seen it yet? You can't introduce it until you show it to the other party. And so she shows it to him. And I guess it was a financial statement or something. What was it, a letter?
Yeah, it was a letter from the bank where the money from the second mortgage we had taken out to start running my business, it was sitting in a joint account because all of my banking stuff was joint with her. None of her banking stuff was joint with me. But we had it in a joint account. And apparently what I found out yesterday was she had actually went to the bank to take some of the money out. And at the advice of my former attorney, they told me to move that money and asked me if I was worried about her taking the money and doing whatever she wanted with it. So I moved that money to another account. And then come to find out right after that, or sometime after that, she had actually went to the bank to take that money out. I don't know how much, but
she was probably going to withdraw as much as she could.
Yeah, probably.
Leave $5 in the account so it stays open.
So apparently they sent her a letter saying that she had been removed. When I'd already removed her from my primary checking account, she actually went with me to the bank and filled the forms out in person. So apparently they'd sent her a letter saying that she had been removed from that account, or the account had been closed or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but she tried to claim that it was from our loan officer that helped us with our mortgage.
Right.
And it was not. It was some woman. And I mean, I'll never, ever, ever, as long as I live, forget our financial or our loan officer's name. There's just no way possible. So when I saw this woman's name on this page, I brought it up because it wasn't our loan officer. So he goes ahead and allows her to admit it, but he says he won't allow her to admit it for the truth that she intended it for, or something like that.
Right. It's limited what they could use it for, which I thought was incredibly wonderful of him.
And you're like, anybody can get this banking emblem offline and put it onto a piece of paper and print something up. I thought that was really good too. And one of the things that I thought was so hilarious about it is because the judicial officer is like, well, why do you wish to, are you building this as a foundation? And she's like, yeah, well, it's going to lead into producing other documents that came from the bank and this and that. And so anyways, he allows it in for temporary purposes or whatever, limited purposes. And right after that, she's like, I'm done. I'm done talking. I'm done doing whatever. And it's like, oh, so you're not going to introduce anything else. And I think what was really going on is that she was realizing that her fraud was pretty close to, being exposed in a very serious kind of bad way.
Yeah, exactly. And the terrific thing was Johnson put it to a stop immediately and said, I'll admit it, but we're only under limited circumstances, that it's not the, the whole truth about this. And I think that's what put a stop to her going even further, producing any more supposed evidence.
So anyways, like at the end of that testimony, it was she was basically accusing Alan of of committing fraud with his fiduciary duties in the marriage, and the separation agreement, which would have been really, really bad. Like, you can't help somebody after that point, because that's breaking the law. And so we break for lunch, and of course, Oracle, myself, Alan, and some other people go to kind of work on exactly what's going on. And it's probably been about 2.5, almost maybe 3 hours, I don't know, but at least 2.5 hours that she has been harping on a lot of things that don't matter and trying to build her case. And I would say within about 20 minutes of Alan getting back, he really just ripped apart the entire thing. She said that she had consented and worked on the contract with them, so that kind of throws out any unfairness, whatever. And then he starts questioning her about the actual assets and stuff, because he brings up the fact that everything that they're counting as an asset is actually a liability. It's all a debt, and when you put those debts together and you subtract it, he ends up, by their numbers, he ends up with about $25,000 in assets, and she already testified that she ended up with about $35,000 in assets. So by all means, she's walking away with a pretty penny comparatively. And I just absolutely couldn't believe it, because the attorney, even up to the closing argument, was still harping on that, almost as if she didn't know the difference between an asset and a liability.
And I tried, every time the judicial officer asked me if I had anything to say, I would stand up and tell him, I would like to make this clear again. These are debts. This is not equity. All these things she's harping on are debts. This is stuff that I was left with the separation.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think he was picking up on that pretty quick.
Yeah.
Even just when you came back and started cross-examining. And so after she had gotten off, one of her friends got up there, and again, it was another character assassination. And Alan does an awesome job, because she goes through all of this stuff, and then when it's Alan's turn to ask her a question, he's like, do you have any firsthand knowledge?
And she says, I don't know what that means.
Anything you just said?
Yeah, she's like, what does that mean? Like, were you there?
Yeah, those were just questions we come up with on the fly, because when we went back to prepare for my ex, we didn't know there was going to be anybody else. He just showed up after the lunch recess.
Yep.
Oh, and no, I think she was sitting in the courtroom all day.
I think one of the most critical things that happened towards the very ending, before it was closing time, was the attorney made another comment trying to reinforce how her client, was taken advantage of, and, wasn't in a mental state of mind to sign the document. She had postpartum, she had depression, PTSD, and immediately the judicial officer said, hey, she's the one who wrote out. She clearly said she helped to write out in her handwriting, the formation of this. I mean, he put a stop to that line of statements immediately, and it shut that attorney down so quickly. And it just proved again that Gene Johnson took incredible notes, even though he didn't look up a lot. He looked down. He was really paying attention to all the details, and was able to come back with all the notes and know exactly pretty much what was going on. And he did a great job towards the end of asking over and over again, is there anything else you want to add to this, Alan? Anything. So I thought that was spectacular. I've never seen that done before.
Yeah, he was adamant every time about me adding or changing or anything. I mean, he was extremely gracious,
Terrific.
I believe.
Yeah.
And he, at one point, he shut her down real quick on the post-nuptial agreement, like Jonathan said earlier. He had already looked at it, and when she started harping on it, he had it pulled back up so he could go along with her while she was harping on it. And he called her to the bench and was like, no. When she tried to bring into question how it was prepared by another attorney.
Yeah, that was absolutely hilarious, because she said that Alan was represented, but not really Katie, her client. And the judicial officer pulls it out, and he's like, well, in this evidence packet, this discovery that you signed into the court, I got your signature right here. It says,
well, she just wanted to volunteer that she found the attorney. She didn't want to volunteer the fact that it was one of her good friend's husbands.
Exactly. I'd like to say that I have gone for over 20 years into the court just to listen to different cases, to get a pulse on the different judicial offices, to see how the judges acted in certain circumstances, to see how which attorney did or said what. And I think it's been a real good education to be able to do that. If anyone has the time, I think it's important to kind of go on in and see how court is being held in your community, in your county, in your state. And I will say that the way Alan handled himself, being incredibly calm, even though I know it's nerve-wracking, you get angry, you get fearful about certain things. He was never reacted out of emotion, and he took notes and was listening. And it's really hard to listen to stuff, especially when you're being falsely accused and demonized. And of course, I will say this particular judicial officer was incredibly patient, more patient than I have seen other judges to be.
Agreed.
And I think that part of that is certainly because of JC being there on the scene, and they know and he's been arrested, and they know the paperwork he puts in, and they certainly know myself and my family, what we've been going through for 8.5 years. But Alan handled himself in a very calm way. He did not overreact. He wasn't over-emotional. He did everything he could to try to be at the present moment and hear what was being said and be able to take those notes down and then come back to bring clarity, reiterate, or to ask certain questions. And he left it real simple. I think it was really, really good to keep it as simple as it was, not bring someone up to demonize his ex-wife. And he didn't even cross-examine her, but asked just a few questions. You have firsthand knowledge of this. It was really, really, really well. I will say in a very short time that Alan has been learning and tutored, certainly by JC, that there's a lot that he was able to pick up in a very short time. So I think, in a lot of ways, it's one of the better experiences I've ever seen in a courtroom. Still awaiting to hear what Gene Johnson says, but there were a lot of positive things that came out of this. It's such a good experience, I think, for people, like I said, to go in and hear how, the court proceedings, what to expect, what not to expect, how to handle yourself. I think this is all really important. And this particular case is, besides it's very interesting and it's close to our heart, and Alan's got a wonderful, supportive family who you don't really see it that often, to have that kind of support. So I just wanted to acknowledge that also.
That's pretty much the only way I've been able to get through this.
From what I've heard on the show and, Hinting's previous, you should be pretty proud. How does it feel to have a notch on your belt?
It's still
You
nerve-wracking.
slayed your
waiting.
first attorney.
That feels good. Somebody else's mental status before we got started.
Yeah.
I think a lot of her game is just trying to pretty much assassinate anybody's character that she's going up against.